David, he believes that you're fixing to hit us tonight, he says.
No, we are not fixing to hit you. That is not true. Nobody's coming in there.
Okay.
You got my word, it's solid, it's 1,000% absolute, okay?
Okay.
I know that everybody's skittish, but, you know, we just got to work on the kids.
Yeah, wait.
Hello?
Hello? No, honey, nobody's going to come and kill you.
Are they going to come and kill me?
No. No. Nobody's coming.
We never went in. We did not introduce fire into this compound. It was not our intention that this compound be burned down. I can't tell you the shock and the horror that all of us felt when we saw those flames coming out there. It was, oh my God, they're killing themselves.
I just hope everyone doesn't jump to making decisions before they've heard our side, because right now all you're hearing is the press. You're hearing a very perverted press.
We believe that this thing had to be brought to a logical conclusion at some point. We never fired one single round of ammunition.
Were there rules of engagement by the FBI? What were they?
Yes, they were, that they would not shoot unless someone's life was in danger.
The joint hearings of the Oversight Subcommittee on Crime will now come to order. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Coble, for 5 minutes.
Thank the gentleman. In the fall of 1993, Treasury and Justice issued their respective reports about Waco. Treasury, in effect, said, well, ATF blew it, we were the bad guys. Justice, on the other hand, exonerates the FBI. Well, folks, when I got those two reports, I thought this is all too coincidental. One group conveniently assuming blame, the other group waltzing away with no blame. I think
this is the approach of what I call the lunatic fringe. Still clings to the notion that there was a gigantic governmental conspiracy that brought about this nightmare. It is difficult to see how any rational human being subscribes to such a notion, but obviously many do. What I am telling you is that the most plausible single explanation for this nightmare, namely the apocalyptic vision of a criminally insane, charismatic cult leader who was hell-bent on bringing about this infernal nightmare in flames and the extermination of the children and the women and the other innocents, is not an explanation that should be cast aside.
Christ has the key of David. Only he can open and none can shut. There's 150 Psalms here.
Vernon Howell thinks he's the Lamb of God, when all he is a cheap thug who interprets the Bible through the barrel of a gun. Now they're making self-serving statements that ATF opened fire on
There
the
was an
compound first.
element in the press conferences every day to demonize David, and it was through the language, you know, cult leader David Koresh and compound and bunker, and militarize the situation so that nothing ever positive came out. There was never any sense of telling the public, well, who are these people?
I'm Paulina.
I'm Stephen.
I'm Vanessa.
Well, you had a bunch of women, children, elderly people. They were all good people. They had different beliefs from others, different beliefs than I have, or maybe different beliefs than you have in their way of life, and especially in their religious beliefs. But basically, they were good people. I was around them quite a lot. They were always nice, mannerly. They minded their own business. They were never overbearing. They were always clean and courteous. I liked them.
And what brings you all the way from England, a nice lovely home of which I've seen and been in, what brings you to America, to a place called Waco, Texas, or Waco, Texas? Anybody want to speak first?
I've always wanted to know, to understand the Bible, and I wanted to know about the 7 seals. And I met somebody who can show me the 7 seals. I asked my pastors, my ministers. I was a former Seventh-day Adventist. Nobody could show me, and now I've found what I've been looking for.
The home video shown throughout this film is the only record of the Davidians during the 51-day siege. It was made because the FBI gave them a camera and asked them to talk about themselves.
We're going to be just fine because God's in control.
The FBI showed those tapes to no one, and in its report admits that it did not do that because it thought that those tapes would have won sympathy for Koresh.
I saw the gates of hell.
Holding a child in your hands that lost its life in a fire where the temperatures reached in excess of 3,000 degrees is something that pierced my heart.
April 19th, turned the TV on, and there I saw the tanks ramming into the front of the building and the fire shooting out, and it was horrifying.
Mommy, he says, you know, they told us about that fire. He says they said my daddy and my brothers and my sisters are gone.
Things will be set straight. People will know the truth of things.
Today, 2 subcommittees undertake historic joint hearings on executive branch conduct that led up to the events at Waco, Texas in 1993. In human terms, these hearings are about a tragic loss of life. 4 brave young law enforcement officers lost their lives on February 28, 1993. A planned raid went badly and off course. These 4 agents, dedicated and proud, deserve our full respect. They did not choose to die, but like many others in law enforcement community, they chose to serve. But this is a complex event. On April 19, 1993, after a 51-day siege, other decisions led to the use of so-called CS gas, and a fire broke out. The fire rapidly consumed the entire Davidian compound, killing all 22 innocent children and more than 60 adults. The truth behind that part of the tragedy is also important, and is the obligation of those who have responsibility for oversight to pursue the truth relentlessly.
The Branch Davidians were a Seventh-day Adventist, or a sect of Seventh-day Adventists. They were an offshoot, developed first in California under the leadership of Victor Hodoff. He moved to Waco in 1934-35, founded a community called Mount Carmel. His followers, in turn, moved to the location we know in the early 60s. If you once get to know these people, they're different from you and me. They're more religious than you and me. They know the Bible better than you and me. They lived apart from the rest of us. They lived in a manner different than the rest of us. They had different marriage customs and different property practices than the rest of us have. And they had a religion that was absolutely incomprehensible to most Christians.
Well, there were people from all walks of life, various nations, and a lot of them came from England. They were colored people as well as white people.
Majority of those people in there were not criminals in the sense of the word that we think about them. They were truly believing people. I believe 99% of those people, their sole purpose was the attainment of eternal life, which is, after all, what I believe all of us that, at least that are Christians and believe in.
The Branch Davidians believe, first of all, that as the remnants of the true faith, they would be attacked by a hostile army representing an apostate government, Babylon they called it, and that it was their religious duty to defend the faith.
Attracted by Koresh's biblical teachings, new members increased the Davidians' numbers. In 1991, they recycled the lumber from the cottages and built the communal church that became familiar during the siege. As a multiracial congregation of all ages from around the world, residents contributed both their labor and money earned by work around Waco to support the spiritual life of Mount Carmel.
It makes nobody's business whether we have a gun or not at this place. Guns are the right of Americans to have. Our government's the greatest in the world. We have freedom, not freedom for religion, not freedom for state, but freedom for all, you see? And that's what a lot of people don't understand.
What he usually quoted is a scripture from Jesus on the night of his arrest, where Jesus did not resist. Jesus says, from now on, let him who has no sword buy one.
Did King David have swords? Did Jesus tell the apostles to carry a sword with you? Yes.
In other words, say, get ready for the future.
This is for the little children, right? God knows how it should be. Stars and stripes are flying, give us justice and liberty for the children's sake. You might have to bear a gun one day. Our children know how to respect, they know how to be mindful, they know how to do right because they see it here. They see it in the parents. We subject ourselves to God. We're obedient unto God. We follow the pattern that God would have us to do.
They would be raised completely in the community. They would have never eaten even the diet of the world, the defiled world out there. Never watched TV, never participated in all the things that he saw as a corruption of the culture. That's how they would explain it.
I think that all of you who got kids in the supermarkets who run and scream and who eat all this junk food all the time and all this candy, I think if you look at the children, you'll see the actual product of the parent.
After the Waco disaster, Alan Stone, a Harvard professor of both law and psychiatry, was asked to serve on a United States Department of Justice panel examining law enforcement policy toward unconventional groups like the Branch Davidians and leaders like David Koresh.
I think Koresh was not a criminal psychopathic type. He had, as a youngster, spent months memorizing the Bible, and particularly these particular passages about the 7 seals. And that sort of repetitive study, memorization, throwing yourself into that kind of disciplined project is not what sociopaths do. And he was able to convince the other people by his knowledge of the Bible and the way he put it together. That's how he convinced people like Mr. Martin and Mr. Schneider, who were both intelligent, serious people. Mr. Martin was a graduate of Harvard Law School. He was one of our earliest African-American graduates. He was certainly not a weirdo. He was certainly not a criminal. He was certainly not a psychopath. He had gone on and done further religious studies after leaving Harvard Law School and had become interested in Koresh's teachings. That is how he got into the compound. So the idea that these people like Schneider and Martin were somehow criminal types, or people who had just been sort of buffaloed by Koresh, I think, is a most unfortunate mischaracterization of.
In contrast to somebody, though, like Jim Jones of the Jonestown disaster,
you must die with some dignity. All they do is taking a drink to go to sleep.
Koresh did not really exercise this stunning, spellbinding, mesmerizing, stare you down sort of approach. Nobody, you talk to the Davidians that have survived, none of them come out talking about, oh, boy, when David spoke, I just felt like, you know, it was God. That isn't how they talk. They don't even have that sort of pious feeling about it.
Why do the heathen rage? What's their problem? And the people imagine a vain thing. What are they thinking? Their thoughts are make-believe. Well, it's a vanity. Their thoughts are vain.
I mean nothing to myself. I want to know what truth is, and I'm searching for it. If he happens to be the vehicle that shows me, I thank God for him.
Could you kind of describe for us how your findings differ from the rest of the reports, who are the reporters who have covered this story?
First of all, I want to say thanks for reading my book.
Well, you're welcome.
Always glad
It's my
to meet
job.
someone who does. The biggest surprise I encountered in writing this book is that I had no competitors. And naturally, my conclusions differ, or my questions differ, because I learned a lot more than they did because they abandoned the story when the building burned down. Now, of course, there were some who didn't abandon it quite as quickly as others, but in general, this represents a major failure of the press in our country. One of the prophecies that had been around Mount Carmel since 1934 called for an ultimate confrontation between God's people, or those at Mount Carmel, and the forces of an armed apostate power called Babylon. Perhaps with that in mind, in 1991, he began studying armaments and buying and selling guns. He pretty quickly found out there's a lot of money to be made at gun shows, and he and other people started going to gun shows. And they bought and sold. We now say, or the press now says, and most people say, they stockpile weapons. All gun dealers stockpile weapons. All gun shops stockpile weapons. We call those stockpiles an inventory.
How can one use firearms as an investment?
The guns that he was buying would go up in value, no question.
Okay. And do you know other people who do that?
Yes, sir.
It's not uncommon by itself,
No, sir,
is it?
not by far.
There was obviously, firearms that were there, and there were a lot of individuals that had their own firearms, and there were, quite an amount of firearms. But being in Texas, we had people come from the community out to our property and shoot with us on our firing range. And it was not really a big deal. I went to a couple gun shows before. I'm not an enthusiast at all, to say the least. But I went to a couple gun shows. I met some people. And, some of our neighbors I would talk to had themselves, they had like 10 and 12 guns just in their little family. So I just kind of call it the good old boy syndrome, the good old boy, kind of mentality down in Texas. And it's a constitutional right. It's not, evil or demonized.
Did you state in your book at page 122 that you thought that the ATF was seeking to enforce unconstitutional firearms laws?
I found a scholar who studied the constitutional history of firearms laws and whose opinion is that they may not be constitutional. I was quite impressed to find out that that argument could be made and thought readers deserved a chance to see it.
Well, now that you've studied it and written and promoted it, what do you think now?
Whether or not they're constitutional?
Aren't you worried about that? Yeah, whether they're constitutional.
If the findings of these professors are trustworthy, that is a question to be litigated in the courts.
I understand. I mean, it's nice to write a book about what may or may not be constitutional and unconstitutional, but yet when you come here to testify, well, there's no question now that you've thought about it, this is not so unconstitutional as you would have thought. Now, just a moment. I didn't.
Mr. Chairman, I think it is incumbent upon all of us to extend courtesy to these witnesses, and I don't see what harm would result or ensue if the gentleman were allowed to explain perhaps a response he didn't get a chance to do.
I think we have to distinguish between illegality and constitutionality. Whether or not the arms laws are constitutional will be, at this point, the courts say they are. Tomorrow they may say different because of the research I cite in my book.
At this time, I believe that all of you have some testimony in front of you from Carrie Jewell. Carrie, welcome and thank you for being here. You can begin.
My mom and Lisa and I went to Texas for Passover in 1991. David preached to us. I sat on the floor playing with his shoelaces while he talked. My mom and Lisa went to do a little shopping. I took a shower, and then I was brushing my hair, sitting in the chair, and David told me to come and sit down by him in the bed. I was wearing a long white t-shirt and panties. He kissed me and sat there, but then he laid me down.
Gentlemen,
he took his penis and rubbed it
I've
on the
been
outside
very,
of my vagina.
very critical of the presentation earlier in this hearing of the victimization of Carrie Jewell, because as serious as child rape is, of course, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was conducting a firearms law investigation and search, and the issue of Mr. Koresh's depravity is not what they were investigating or going to serve a search warrant for. And I think that that testimony was put into this hearing to take newspaper headlines and other media attention away from a lot of the testimony about the law enforcement participation in the raid.
I'd like to just introduce the biographies of the panel. Dick Guerin is a widely recognized defense attorney in the state of Texas. He represented David Koresh and entered the compound during the siege. Would like to also introduce Mr. Jack Zimmerman, also a well-known and respected attorney. He represented Steve Snyder. He also gathered first-hand evidence upon entering the compound during the siege. In addition to being a defense attorney, Mr. Zimmerman is a colonel in the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He practices as a military judge. Two very credible witnesses. Welcome.
You are saying, Mr. Guerin, I saw in David Koresh not a person who was insane, a person who was deeply committed and sincere about his religious beliefs. Well, I am sorry for you if that's what you see in him.
This was not a bunch of people who'd been hypnotized. These people that I saw, and I met almost everybody in there that died in that fire, these people believed. They believed in the Bible. Some people had been there as long as 40 years. Some people had been born and raised there. They were there because they believed in a vision of the Bible that was unusual. I don't understand it. And these scholars have a difficult time understanding it. But it was real. You can't legislate away that. In fact, the First Amendment says that we can't do anything about that.
Do you doubt the testimony of Carrie Jewell, who was here? Did you hear about that?
Yes, I do.
You doubt that?
Yes.
Do you doubt that, Mr.
Yes,
Zimmerman?
sir.
Okay.
Do you know why?
Yeah, you can tell me why.
That we didn't learn of that the first time when she testified for this hearing. She's made that kind of claim has been made for some time. Her own mother didn't believe that. Her own grandmother didn't believe that.
Right.
There's been doubts about prior contradictory statements that she's made in the past. Now, it may be 100% true.
Just
it may be 100%
my time
true.
because my time is up. In my judgment, in many ways, these witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact about David Koresh.
And I'd like
We worked on that for a couple of years. In fact, we had the Department of Human Services go out and interview some of the kids and whatever they could do. I had people go out with them to interview. To this day, we don't have a case that we can make against Vernon Howell or anyone for child abuse. Even though the news media here and other people kept saying this is what happened, a man from Australia said this is what happened. But we could never get them to give us anything more than just, we know that's what happened. You have to have proof to go into court. Keep in mind, too, that most of the girls who were involved were at least 14 years old, and 14-year-olds get married with parental consent. So if their parents were there and letting things happen in the way of sexual activities and what have you with their 14-year-old kids, you have common law husbands and wives. I don't say that I agree with that and that I approve of it, but at the same time, if parents are there and they're giving parental consent, we have a problem with that and making a case.
My investigations convinced me that David Koresh was guilty of statutory rape. But I don't understand why 2/3 of the search warrant is about child abuse and statutory rape when the ATF has no jurisdiction over those offenses.
We determined that at the compound, machine guns were being manufactured and explosive devices. Our goal through this investigation was to execute a search warrant on that house to obtain those illegal weapons.
In addition, it had reason to believe that Koresh and his followers might pose a danger not only to themselves but to the surrounding community.
I think in the case of the Davidians, if people had listened carefully to their rhetoric with an ear toward an understanding of religious apocalyptic language, would probably not have been worried about them using these weapons against their neighbors.
In a word, what the search warrant found was gun parts. It was the duty of the ATF to show that those gun parts were owned with an intent to create illegal weapons. I'm not a lawyer or a judge, but my reading of the warrant does not convince me that that intent was there.
Do you say it's not been proven that there were 48 illegal machine guns and a bunch of illegal hand grenades on his compound?
I believe there were 48 illegal automatic weapons on April the 19th. I don't
That's
know
correct.
that that's the case on February 28th, sir.
I see, but there were weapons there.
Yes.
How about hand grenades? Was there testimony about that?
I
Or were they just...
I don't know. I don't recall that.
Do you recall, Mr. DeGuerin?
No, I don't know any.
Even though you know every other detail about the trial.
That's not fair, Mr. Schumer.
Do you doubt that there were 48 illegal weapons and
I've
hand
never
grenades
said
there?
I knew all the details of the trial.
Do you
I've never
doubt that?
said
I'm
he
asking
was
you that
peaceful.
right now, sir.
What is your question?
My question is, do you doubt, do you have doubts that Mr. Koresh had on his compound illegal weapons and illegal hand grenades? Do
No,
you have
he
any
took-
doubts about that?
No, he told
Thank
me
you.
he had illegal
Okay.
weapons
Do you
there.
have
He
doubts
did not
that-
tell me that he had hand grenades there.
I see.
And I saw
Okay.
no hand grenades. I did see some grenades that the ATF had thrown in, and I brought one out.
What do you
to
mean
the,
thrown in?
The ATF threw in grenades in their
No,
dynamic
they didn't throw
entry,
any
Mr.
grenades
Schumer.
in, as I
Yes,
understand
they did.
it.
I
They
brought
were
one
flash.
out.
They were flash packs. They did
Have
not
you ever seen
explode.
what a flashbang can do to somebody? It's a grenade. It has an explosive charge in it. It's very dangerous. It can blow your hand off. It can blow your face off. It can kill. I would have brought out some of the unexpended grenades that the ATF threw in, but I was worried about bringing out a live grenade, so I left them there. There were a number of grenades.
Okay, Mr. DeGuerin, I think that would hamper your credibility because you're the first person who would say that those were grenades. I've never really sat through a hearing the likes of yesterday. 6.5 hours of defense lawyers, their marathons, their ways of sliding over the truth was very unfortunate. This idea of the FBI having hand grenades, not flashbangs, but hand grenades. And finally, coup de grace, Mr. de Guerin said flashbangers can kill, injure, maim. Anyone who knows anything about these things knows they can't.
Mr. Kavanaugh, I have in my hand here a amount of Play-Doh. Mr. Bush, if you could, this is just standard Play-Doh. If that were a flashbang grenade or a stun grenade, the same thing, which was live, which pin had been pulled, would you feel comfortable just holding that in your hand?
Well, Mr. Barr, a flashbang grenade, my answer is no. I would not want to hold it.
Those are classified as destructive devices under 26 U.S.C. Section 5845F, aren't they?
Yes, sir, they are.
That they can kill people. Is that true?
Certainly, yes, sir.
Well, a gentleman by the name of Warren L. Parker, an explosives enforcement officer, Bureau of ATF, on May 11, 1994, in court, said under oath that they are designed to help kill the suspect while not endangering the law enforcement officer when they're used for those purposes.
I'd like to focus on the search warrant. First, it was put together, as a number of witnesses have testified, in a prejudicial and inflammatory manner. And second, it clearly misstates the U.S. Code statute number for the offense charged, and I think makes other technical mistakes in the law, which means to me it was put together in a sloppy fashion. Now, you put together inflammatory with sloppy. That translates to me that ATF was in a hurry to make a big splash with something.
Why was a warrant sought in the first place, since David Koresh, on learning that he was being investigated by ATF, invited the agency on July 30th, 1992, through his gun dealer, Henry McMahon, to come to his residence and inspect his firearms?
And I go, I got David Koresh on the phone. And David Aguilera, he jumps up and goes, don't call, don't call. And I go, I got him on the phone. And he goes.
They never once followed up on that offer, never even tried to follow up on that offer.
I can't imagine any circumstances that I would not take up such an offer. Perhaps what the ATF thought were violations of the law were really things that Mr. Koresh thought were legal.
Suggests perhaps that what they really wanted to do was to conduct a raid, not make an arrest or conduct a search.
In the opinion of the agents, the planning for Waco and the manner in which it was done for the purpose of publicity.
Mr. Hartnett, there's a rumor, and surely it's unfounded, that the publicity person or public relations person for ATF had released some kind of a press communication the night before to media around the country that something big was going to come down in Texas?
Yes, and we heard that, and she called a reporter to ask if he was going to be in.
Why did she do that?
She wanted to be able to get a hold of them if there was a story and they recovered these arms.
Wouldn't there be ample time after they were recovered?
Oh, yes. I mean,
what happened is that I contacted Channel 8 and Channel 5 in Dallas. I just said we might have something going on here in Dallas this weekend, and I'd like to have a weekend contact number, and that's what I was given.
What was the purpose of contacting them? Were you actually seeking publicity for the agency?
Absolutely not, sir.
Okay, maybe then I don't understand the purpose for contacting them.
With its appropriations hearings a week away, a large successful raid would produce major positive headlines to counter the ATF's reputation as a rogue agency whose debacles blackened the reputation of other agencies. And it would scare the public enough about fringe groups to create political pressure on Congress to increase its budget.
At least part of the ATF motivation, even if it never rose to the surface of discussion, was to enforce the morals of our society, to enforce the psyche of right thinking.
Let me just ask Mr. Moulton, was there a cover-up?
Absolutely not. Not by the Treasury Department in the preparation of that report, absolutely not.
Do you agree with that comment?
No, I don't.
Why?
I feel that the Treasury Department has said things since the time of the raid at Waco that have been incorrect. It also had many omissions, distortions, and false statements in it.
And why do you believe those omissions and false statements are in that report?
I believe that they were concerned about the fallout from the media.
Were these agents knowingly outgunned before they started?
We weren't outgunned at Waco, that's for sure.
Almost 100 agents spent 3 days in dress rehearsals at Fort Hood, Texas, all at U.S. Army expense.
In order for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to have obtained the military assistance they did receive, not because of the Posse Comitatus Act, but because of existing military policy, they misrepresented to the military that this was an anti-drug raid when it was never an anti-drug raid.
Unfortunately, there are many people who still, when they speak to me about Waco, say, well, those people were involved in drugs. And there's no evidence that Koresh was or that any of these people were.
As practicing lawyers, we know that usually judges rubber stamp the applications for search warrant.
The Fourth Amendment guarantees the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Ironically, a charred copy of the very amendment was found in the debris at Waco. There's the charred copy that was found right there at Waco.
The morning of February 28th, ATF and Texas Department of Public Safety officers blocked the roads leading to Mount Carmel Center. Several miles away, the raid team was busy suiting up, fully expecting to surprise the Davidians. Sharon Wheeler had ample videotape for the many cameras that agency officials thought would record a major publicity coup. Most of the 130 men, women, and children inside Mount Carmel learned about the raid only minutes before it happened.
The news people were out there 30 minutes before the raid. That's how supposedly they were tipped off by a news person.
About the time I got there, David came in from the other side, different side of the room, and came in and said that they'd heard that somebody was coming, and he wanted everybody to remain calm and go back to their rooms and just stay cool. He would go down the front door and talk to them.
You're with Koresh, correct? He gets very nervous. Did you request that the raid be called off because the element of surprise had been lost?
Yes, sir. I arrived at the command post, and the first thing I asked was, "Where's Chuck? Where's Chuck?" And they advised me that he had left. At that time, I started yelling, and I said, "Why? Why? They know we're coming. They know we're coming."
I did not feel he knew that we were coming at that time. When I talked with Robert, like I testified before, I took notes while we were talking over the thing, and I've read all of Robert's statements. Robert did a great job, but I think everything that you heard as far as testimony was not passed on to me.
Those two men know what I told them, and they knew exactly what I meant. And instead of coming up and admitting to the American people right after the raid that they had made a mistake, that the element of surprise had been lost, that the agent had advised them that they knew they were coming, instead of doing that, they lied to the public, and in doing so, it just about destroyed a very great agency.
The helicopters were to arrive first at the rear of Mount Carmel and divert the Davidians' attention from the ATF agents moving in on the ground from the front.
Approximately 9:15, we saw 3 helicopters, 2 small ones and a large one. And we sat there and watched them. They were making big loops behind the compound, just sort of circling, not the compound, but behind it. And I got the camera out and proceeded to shoot the helicopters flying around.
So I've got 3 of them.
We put the camera back in, we look up, and a cattle trailer goes by. It's chock full of ATF agents. And we're sitting there, and about 2, 3, 4 seconds later, another cattle trailer goes by.
I saw a truck come in, and very long, truck in the front, then this long thing. The second truck stopped and barely stopped, and a man jumped out in all kind of whatever gear it was he had on, and he had a gun in his hand. He says, "Okay, boys." Then I heard a voice to the right of me, downstairs. I could tell it was at the door. Then I heard a voice on the outside. Then I heard another voice inside, and then I heard shots outside.
And when we drove up, the Davidians opened fire. And I'm sickened by any other assertion. I sat there and I watched it. And the gunfire came through those double white doors. I watched it. It's unbelievable, but that's what happened. And anybody else who says anything different, they shot first. And if I thought that an ATF agent would drive up in front of a structure and shoot, I'd throw my badge in the garbage. It didn't happen.
According to the ATF, their men pull up to Mount Carmel, piled out of their cattle trailers, went running towards the door, guns pointed, shouting, "Police, search warrant, lay down." According to them, David was standing at the front door unarmed, and he shut the door when they started running towards him. And the next thing the ATF knew, it says, it was receiving gunfire from inside of Mount Carmel, in particular from behind that front door.
He knew law enforcement was coming, and he was so diabolical that he laid an ambush.
David Koresh expresses this. He says in this tape that he went out on his porch. He said, "Stop, there's women and children in here," and a shot rang out and hit the door to the right. That door, he says, kicked.
I went running down the hall and found Perry Jones laying in the hall, screaming that he'd been shot. Perry Jones was in his 60s. He was unarmed, as was David Koresh. When they went to the front door, both were shot in the area of the front door. David was shot in the wrist. Perry Jones was shot in the stomach.
And then he says, "If you don't believe me, look at the videotape. I know you have that tape," he says. "I saw you making it across the road."
According to the agency, there were 3 or 4 video cameras pointed at the front door. It could tell you everything that happened at the front door of that building that day. They claim they can't find a single one of them. Every one of those videotapes vanished.
If the Branch Davidians intended to ambush those people with 48 machine guns and 50 caliber machine guns, and they came up in unprotected cattle cars with nothing but tarps on them, they would have blown them away. So that convinced us that they did not, that is, the Davidians did not fire first.
I sat by that door for several hours. I went in and out of that door 10 times. And I saw the bullet holes on the door on the right side. Almost every bullet hole was an incoming round. And what I mean by that, it's a metal door. You could easily tell that the bullets were incoming rounds. They were punched in. Now, I'm not the Marine expert that Jack Zimmerman is, but I've been hunting since I was 10 years old, and I know a bullet hole when I see it. And those were bullet holes that were punched in.
Of course, the majority of bullet holes would be going in that direction, because the Davidians are not going to keep the door closed and shoot through it.
What you need to find is the videotape that was made of the raid. It disappeared. What you need to get is the photographs of the front that are similar to the one that's being displayed right now. Now, you have the power to get that evidence, and you ought to get it.
That is not fair. That is not a proceeding that is right. If we want to go over the issue of who fired first, then we should... Wait a second. I'd like to finish my point.
It's not a point of order.
It is a point of order.
It is not a point of order. You are out of order.
Zimmerman.
I will just make one comment to the witnesses relative to the videotape in the front door. We have consistently asked as a committee to get a copy of a videotape, which they now say is blank. We have asked for the door, and the door is missing.
first cattle trailer had already pulled up. The second one was pulling up when we got about halfway down the driveway, and all hell broke loose.
All this is happening while they're supposed to serve a knock search warrant. You know, they knock on the door and serve the warrant. And you have one group of ATF agents who goes to the front of the building. And there's a very large penned-up area that we had for fawn, an Alaskan Malamute, and her 4 pups that were living there. And they shot them in cold blood, first thing.
This was an unreasonable search done in an unreasonable manner with excessive force. And the law is clear. Even an arrest by lawfully constituted officers can be resisted if, before anything else happens, those officers use excessive force.
They, of a couple of agents or a couple of detectives walking up to somebody's front door or knocking on a door in 3-piece suits to execute a warrant of any kind is over. And that's where we stand. We stand between the Koresh's of the world and everybody here. We stand. Law enforcement.
Yeah, the 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us at Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel? Yeah, tell them there are children and women in here to call it off. I hear gunfire. Who is it? Wayne. Tell me what's happening, Wayne. There are women and children in danger. Wayne. I'm under fire. I'm going to call it out. What? I'm going to pull back. I have a right to defend myself. They started firing first.
First 15, 20 minutes, it was get the job done, shoot the video. And then when you see people getting shot, you can hear people screaming and the bullets hitting. I have 2 daughters, and I started thinking about my daughters. And at that point, I wondered, how the heck am I going to get out of here?
They were throwing everything at us, and their guns sound like cannons, and our guns sound like pop guns. We had 9mm. They were hitting us with .223, AK-47s, 50 calibers. But it was more than you can imagine.
We're under fire! Okay, stand by while I make contact with the forces, okay? We need to try the radio band one more time on our frequency. You called it, kids. Hold on just a minute, Wayne. Hello. No, I have not. And nobody's responding to the damn radio. They want everybody to back off and talk. I'm trying to get what radio frequency. They told me the radio ran. We're not getting a response. I can't believe this.
Get the fuck out of here!
They're hitting me, trying to take my camera away from me, yelling at me. And after all this went down, the Secret Service asked me if I wanted to prosecute the agents. And I said no. I said, I understand them. And I was their first vent valve.
At this point, we were surrounded. At this point, we did not have a clue what the government, Babylon in our opinion, was going to do in retaliation.
After about approximately 2 hours, we heard that there was a truce. We heard ATF agents say, "Don't shoot, don't shoot."
The agents were out of ammunition.
They could have killed nearly every ATF agent out there the day of the raid had they kept shooting. But when they said they would leave their property, they quit shooting them.
You got to argue with me, you come and argue with me. You come pointing guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time. And I'm sorry some of you guys got shot. But, hey, God will have to sort that out, won't he?
The chair recognizes Mrs. Taylor from Mississippi.
Do you have any combat experience?
26 months, sir. Commanded 2 artillery batteries in Vietnam.
In Vietnam?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Zimmerman, have you seen anything or heard anything that would lead you to believe, or read anything that justifies the murder of those 4 ATF agents and the 20 more who were wounded by the Branch Davidians by David Koresh and his followers on the morning of February 28th?
The jury in San Antonio found that the killings of the 4 agents were in self-defense.
They were acquitted of murder, sir. Did you know that? They were acquitted of murder and acquitted of conspiracy to commit murder. Every single defendant, all 11 were acquitted of murder.
Are you going to tell me that every murderer in this country who's walked was really innocent?
Well, you asked me, did we know of anything that would say that they weren't guilty of murder? And the answer is yes. If the ATF accidentally or however opened fire on people in their home and all they did was defend themselves in their home, then under the law, that's justifiable homicide. It's not murder.
Is there any way that somebody could believe that justifiable homicide could be used as a defense here?
No, Mr. Schumer. They shot through the doors. They shot through the ceilings. Assertions that we had helicopters or men from Mars shooting at them is nonsense.
Somebody said to me, Winston Blake is dead. I said, where's he at? And they said, he's up in his room. So as I'm approaching Winston's room, I could hear water running, and I couldn't figure it out. You know, what would that be? You know. But as I turned into his doorway, Winston's lying on the floor beside his bed, and a pool of blood and water, and there's water pouring into the room from just dozens of bullet holes in the water tank that was right outside his window. And the window was all shattered and everything. I figured that, judging from the angle of the bullets coming down from the outside and into the room, that it had to be from helicopter. There's no buildings, tall buildings out the back. Anybody on the ground couldn't have shot at that angle into the water tanks.
You're looking out of the window, seeing 3 helicopters, and the next minute you hear firing and you're on the floor with bullet shells flying all over your head. It's frightening.
We have people out here, we have all these people, women, children, tiny babies. These men came in here and they started firing on us. The bullets came through the walls and people were killed, people were injured. And this is America.
What happened there with your finger? You were just sitting there? I was told you were nursing the baby?
I was sitting here kind of like, I'm not exactly sure it happened so fast, but at any rate, it went up this finger into my hand and out my shoulder.
We must understand that not one agent who was at the raid on the scene on the 28th made a written report of it. That's highly irregular. On March the 1st, the ATF initiates a shooting review. Johnston, the assistant United States attorney, advised Hartnett to stop the ATF shooting review because ATF was creating Brady material. Brady material, ladies and gentlemen, is information that might tend to show that someone accused is innocent. They try to explain this to say, well, that just meant, you know, we don't want to, compromise the prosecution. You don't want to compromise the prosecution by revealing evidence that might tend to show that somebody is not guilty of the charges? Well, That's not where we are in this country, I hope.
That's just one agency. All the other agencies back there are going to back them up. That's including our federal government. We, the people, don't run this government anymore. They do, and they tell all the lies they want. Those that are trying to do their best, are trying to do their job, they have a family back home too. But they don't understand what the system is doing. If they did, they would speak out against it.
Shortly after the wounded arrived, armed guards stood sentry at the hospital entrances. ATF agents comforted each other as they found out the toll taken in this raid. 15 agents were brought to Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center. 3 of them died, including one agent who was shot in the head.
Oh, God.
Are you okay?
I'm bleeding again. I coughed. Wait a minute.
We'll see one of the holes here. Here's one of them. That look nice. One up higher. I think this one went out right here. Is it leaking? Can you see that, Steve?
That's too big. You got to trim where it.
Oh.
If you die, you tell me, if you die from that wound, I want you to tell me what's going to happen.
Well, I'm not going to be around anymore, am I, to influence anybody, right?
David, listen.
No, Jim, listen.
This has been painful for us. Come on.
Listen, Jim. There's nothing that hurts me more than being called a cult leader, all right? If I'm wrong, people like me don't deserve to live, okay?
Listen.
You understand me, Jim. If you let the people think, because, they're all scared around here now. Don't burn our building down.
No, we won't do that.
Don't shoot us all up. They've got to have that time.
David, if you die, you're leaving your people helpless.
Look, they're God's people.
But if
I'm just an instrument, okay? I'll show them out of a book what God teaches. Then it's for them to decide.
Is this bleeding again?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you can see it anyway. It's kind of painful. Oh, it ain't nothing, tough guy like me. It's just flesh, it heals.
Some Davidian mothers sent their children out of Mount Carmel. As they were delivered to a rendezvous point, news reports said 3 Davidians tried to escape by shooting their way past ATF agents. The story was false.
Sunday, my husband was killed by ATF agents. I want everyone to know.
They say that they stopped them and they asked for who they were or whatever. I don't see how any of the ATF agents were close enough to ask him any questions.
Michael Schroeder's body is left in a ravine for 5 days, 300 yards from Mount Carmel. According to the ATF statements, Schroeder refused demands to surrender and raised a pistol. 11 agents fired on Schroeder. The autopsy report indicates that he had 7 bullet entries.
Why it takes so many fatal bullet wounds to knock somebody to the ground?
According to testimony, as the ATF agents were walking away with their prisoner, leaving Mike lay there like a piece of meat, an ATF agent stated that they heard 2 more gunshots.
Norman was picked up. He told
the others when he was in jail with them. He said, after I surrendered, he said, and they were taking me away, he said, I heard 2 more shots up the back.
Schroeder's autopsy report also indicated that there were 2 entry wounds behind his right ear, only 2 inches apart. The bullets passed through this blue stocking cap. However, the stocking cap was not examined during the autopsy, nor was any forensic testing conducted before Schroeder's relatives had his body cremated.
They said Mike ambushed them. There were 17 of them as against him, and they were dressed up as trees. They've got a lot to answer for.
On the phone front, Jim Kavanaugh was trying to get David Koresh to trust him.
Well, I think we need to, set the record straight, and that is that there was no guns on those helicopters. There was National Guard officers on those helicopters.
There was no guns on those helicopters.
That's a lie. That is a lie. He's a damn liar.
Did you hear that?
I know what he said, but it's not true.
He wants to talk to you now.
Okay.
Now, Jim, you're a damn liar. Now, let's get real.
David?
No, you listen to me. You're sitting there and telling me that there were no guns on that helicopter?
I said they didn't shoot. There's no guns shot.
You are a damn liar.
Oh, you're wrong, David.
You are a liar.
Okay. Well, just calm down.
And, let me tell you something. That may be what you might want the media to believe. But there's other people that fall, too. Now, tell me, Jim, again. You're honestly going to say those helicopters didn't fire on any of us?
David?
I'm here.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that those helicopters did not have mounted guns, okay? I'm not disputing the fact that there might have been fire from the helicopters. What I'm telling you is there was no mounted guns, outside mounted guns on those helicopters.
I agree with you on that.
All right, and that's the only thing I'm saying. Now, the agents on the helicopters had guns.
I agree with you on that.
You understand what I'm saying?
Well, no, what the dispute was over, I believe, Jim, is that you said that they didn't fire on us from the helicopter.
Well, what I mean is a mounted gun.
Yeah, but beside the point, what they did have was machine guns.
Okay, I don't know what they had. They were armed. The people inside had pistols or
we agree
rifles.
Then.
Okay, all right, that's good. That's good. We agree. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Okay.
You could have arrested me any day as I jogged up and down this road. You could have arrested me going to town or going to Walmart. All this stuff you guys may want to avoid and deny. And I do not appreciate it, and never will I ever appreciate somebody coming here and pushing people around with guns. Hey, I'll meet you at the doorstep any day. And somebody will get hurt. If you want to keep playing that game, I'm talking to you. Somebody's going to get hurt. Because this ain't America anymore when the ATF has that kind of power to come into anybody's home and kick doors down and things like that.
On March 1st, the BATF handed control to the FBI.
My name is Dan Hartnett. I'm the Deputy Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I'm going to make a brief statement. We each are going to make a brief statement, and then we will open it up to questions.
My name is Jeff Jamar. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the FBI in the San Antonio Division, and I'm the Special Agent in charge of FBI operations here in Waco.
Could you spell your name?
It's J-A-M-A-R. First name's Jeff. We're here because David Koresh and his followers killed 4 ATF agents. We've responded with necessary personnel and equipment. The area is a crime scene. The goal is to resolve this situation ultimately in federal court with no further bloodshed.
The FBI is getting involved now, but it's kind of like getting into a fight with a couple of next door neighbors where the little brother comes over and whips you, and then the big brother comes over to investigate. Anyway, we'll try to work this out.
We're prepared to do whatever it takes and stay here as long as it takes to settle this matter without any further bloodshed.
Was there an interview?
the Davidians were completely surrounded. FBI snipers were placed in sandbag positions here and here. Their clear field of fire meant anyone trying to leave would easily be gunned down. Sierra 1 was the code name for the front half of Mount Carmel Center. It was the side news cameras saw through telescopic lenses a mile or two away. Sierra 2 was the back half of Mount Carmel. It was completely hidden from public view.
It was the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms that caused this first disaster. Okay? So the FBI takes over. They're very sensible, reasonable. They decide, we'll negotiate.
They quickly realized that the negotiators were not in charge, and Koresh at one point says, look, all you guys are anyway are waitresses. You carry my request back to the kitchen where the boss is. They say, look, I can't make the decisions. If I could, things would go better, but the decisions are being made 1,500 miles away in Washington, D.C.
We made an agreement with the ATF agents that if they would allow me to have national coverage with this tape, so that I might give to the world a small, minute bit of the information that I have tried so hard to share with people.
Can you say what God said to him? Can you give a little more details exactly? After 1:30, you're waiting for him, you finally make contact. What does he say?
The question was, what did God say to Koresh? He says that he did not fulfill his promise to leave immediately with his followers because God told him to wait.
And Schneider says, and Koresh afterwards later says, look, we didn't lie. This is like you guys telling us you're not going to turn off the lights or one thing or another and getting overruled from above. We have our chain of command. You have your chain of command.
He gave us his word that after the message was played...
Yes, but what if there is a higher power than you and I that speaks to an individual? If there is a God in this universe, and there's the laws of man and there's the laws of God, and this God that has led him all his life says to him to wait, what do you do?
When the FBI said that 5 times Koresh promised to come out and didn't, Dr. Arnold, Dr. Tabor, and I sent a message to them. We said, show us the 5 times. We can't find them in the negotiation transcripts. We think they're making that up. We find no incidents, those of us who've listened to the negotiation tapes and studied the transcripts, of Koresh lying. On March the 2nd, he said he was coming out and then said God told him not to. If any lies were told, it was that, and we would have to know what God said to Koresh in order to call that a lie.
Do you people believe that Koresh is actually talking to God?
Koresh believes he's talking to God. The FBI wasn't prepared to share David Koresh's contention that we should wait on God to resolve this. The FBI is God. It's going to decide how this is going to be resolved.
Bringing these tanks and stuff around here, I tell you what, being an American first, I'm the kind of guy that I'll stand in front of a tank. You can run over me, but I'll be biting one of the tracks. No one's going to hurt me or my families. That's American policy here.
Agent Pete Smerick, who was in charge of drawing up the psychological profile of Koresh, counseled a cautious, non-confrontational approach with Koresh in 4 memos written to senior FBI officials between March 3rd and March 8th. According to Mr. Smerick, FBI superiors pressured him to change his assessment to justify a more confrontational approach.
They would do things like play sound tapes of rabbits being slaughtered or Nancy Sinatra singing songs, and then they would bring out lights at night, and not that Nancy Sinatra always was that bad, but the ones that she had kept. The point was this: they were trying to have sleep disturbance, and they were trying to take somebody that they viewed to be unstable to start with, and then they were trying to drive him crazy, and then they get mad because he does something that they think is irrational.
You keep playing where you shouldn't be playing, and you keep thinking that you'll never get burned. I just found me a brand new box of matches, yeah. And what he knows you ain't had time to learn. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Next, we have a couple of Kansas City's finest members of the SWAT team. This one here is quite a specimen. I tell you, in all my years involved with SWAT, I've never seen a gentleman like this that I've learned so much from in just the short time I've been around him. It's just awesome is about the only word to describe him.
Honed to a fine edge, honed to kill.
That's right. He's just a Rambo. He's just like Rambo out here himself.
Yes, right here.
Mr. Ricks, is there a consideration to use psychological warfare? Have you discussed it at all?
I don't know what psychological warfare is.
It was reported in the paper that you would play loud music, keep bright lights on the compound all night to try to agitate the entire group. Is that a possibility?
We will not discuss tactics of that sort, but I would say the chances are minimal of doing that type of activity. Yes, ma'am.
Day 7 finds reporters facing a banner reading, "God help us, we want the press." Reporters respond with a statement of their own.
God help us, we are the press!
They were assuring us that we would be cared for in a professional manner. Then you turn around and you've got people that are flipping you the finger over top of the tanks. They're dropping their drawers and baring their butts. And these are the type of people that you're supposed to go out to.
When I first was asked to be involved as a member of the panel, I thought the main problem was going to be understanding the psychology of the people inside the compound. But as I got into it, I quickly became aware that the psychology of the people outside the compound was more important to an understanding of what happened.
They were mooning the women, for instance. They would drop their pants and bend over and bare their rear end to people that were looking out the windows, which was, not a situation that some of the women or even some of the men took too lightly, in the sense, well, do we want to send our children out to these kind of people?
Steve, every time we're aware of movement, we've told you about controlling these guys. I mean, if you got guys out there right now pulling their pants down, men that are mature, they're sticking their butts out in the air and flipping the finger. Give me a moment. See, the guys that gravitate toward, riding in tanks, jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that are a little different mindset than you and I. I agree with you. Right? I agree. So when they get a chance to use a Bradley, probably half of them have never been in a Bradley before. It reminded me of a lot of kids in there. Absolutely. An opportunity to, hey, let's drive this baby and see how it works. Sure, but somebody's got to be above these guys. Well, those vehicles and what they're doing do not show what is coming out of the mouths of some of you guys.
Let me give you an example. Now that we brought this up, we had a burial for one of the people out front. Peter Gent was buried out front, and the tanks ran over his grave over and over and over again, just totally like it wasn't even there, and they knew that's where we buried him. And they just kept running over it and over it, and we were disgusted with that. We talked about that quite a bit.
I mean, I thought this was the country of, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, whatever, and just human decency. It just doesn't seem to exist.
They saw all this as working from a military point of view because the people inside the compound, the Branch Davidians, weren't shooting back. So they saw themselves as winning the battle as they tightened. What they didn't realize was we're driving them to the point of desperation.
To my family and friends, I'd just like to say I'm fine. I know that you're all worried about us. I'd just like to know that we're fine right now, and everything in the hands of God right now, and we're just waiting on God. Whatever happens, we know it's the way that God wants it to be.
If they thought that we were all brainwashed and such a bunch of crazies, why would the FBI push David or the rest of us to the limit? Did they want to create an incident? Did they want us to come out, crazy and start shooting so that they'd have an excuse to gun us down? We didn't know.